You have been lied to your entire life. Not by your enemies. Not by strangers. But by one of the most well-meaning pieces of advice ever passed from one person to another. You have heard it from coaches, mentors, bosses, and best-selling books. You have seen it printed on motivational posters. You have repeated it yourself. 3 words: trust the process. And here is the problem: if you do not understand the process, you cannot trust it. You cannot track it. You cannot know whether you are making progress or spinning your wheels. And that is exactly why millions of intelligent, ambitious, hard-working professionals end up feeling stuck, frustrated, and quietly wondering whether they are simply not built for the kind of success they want. Today, we are breaking that down completely. The book is called The Process: 6 Mechanics of Achievement by Mitesh Jani, a practicing dentist, investor, and a decade-long student of the human mind. This is not another feel-good self-help book filled with empty affirmations. This is a structured, psychologically backed blueprint for how achievement actually works, from the inside out. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what those 6 mechanics are, how to use them, and why most people fail, not because they lack talent or ambition, but because they never understood the inner machinery behind lasting success. Stay with me. This is going to change how you think about everything. The case for an inner process. Let us start with a question Mitesh Jani asks right at the beginning of this book: why do smart, motivated people fail to achieve what they want? The answer he gives is both surprising and uncomfortable. They fail not because of a lack of ambition, but because they have never been taught how the process of achievement actually works. Think about it. The modern education system, as impressive as it is designed to train people to follow a preset path. You are told what to study, when to study it, and what success looks like. There are right answers and wrong answers. There are grades and promotions. The path is mapped for you. But then you graduate. You step into real life. And suddenly, the map disappears. Nobody hands you a syllabus for building a business, mastering a craft, transforming your health, or finding your purpose. And when you try to set your own goals and follow your own path, something breaks down. You freeze. You overthink. You start and stop. You procrastinate disguised as planning. And eventually, you wonder whether something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You were simply never given the right tools. That is what this book is about. Jani argues that achievement, real, meaningful, lasting achievement, follows a set of universal mechanics. These mechanics apply whether you are an entrepreneur, an artist, an athlete, or a professional trying to climb to the next level. They apply regardless of your background, your personality, or your industry. And once you understand them, you stop guessing and start operating with clarity and confidence. The author calls this framework the 6 mechanics of achievement. And he frames the entire philosophy with 5 words at the top of the book's cover: inner work for outer results. That phrase is not just a tagline. It is the thesis. The revolution Jani is proposing is not about hacks, shortcuts, or productivity systems. It is about going inward, rewiring how you think, how you see yourself, and how you engage with the work, so that the outer results become almost inevitable. Let us walk through each mechanic, one by one. Mechanic 1. The power of reckless beginnings. The first mechanic of achievement is deceptively simple, and yet it stops more people dead in their tracks than any other obstacle on the journey. You have to start. That sounds almost insulting in its simplicity. Of course you have to start. Everyone knows that. But knowing it and actually doing it are 2 very different things, and Jani spends a great deal of this section explaining precisely why starting is the hardest part of any meaningful endeavor. He uses a concept from physics: the difference between static friction and dynamic friction. If you have ever tried to push a heavy box across the floor, you know exactly what this feels like. The moment before the box begins to move, there is enormous resistance. The floor grips the box. It takes maximum force. But the second the box starts moving, something remarkable happens, the friction drops significantly. The box is suddenly much easier to push. The same principle governs human action. The inertia before you begin, the resistance, the doubt, the paralysis, is at its absolute peak before the first step. Once you take that first step, momentum takes over, and continuing becomes dramatically easier than starting was. This is why Jani advocates what he calls reckless beginnings. He is not suggesting that you leap blindly into chaos without any thought. He is arguing against the trap that he identifies as the planning high, the dopamine-fueled pleasure you get from imagining a future success without doing any of the actual work. You spend hours mapping out your business plan, designing your ideal routine, or researching every possible variable, and it feels productive. It feels like progress. But it is not. The planning high is procrastination in disguise. It gives your brain the emotional reward of achievement without requiring any of the sacrifice. Jani uses the example of Steve Jobs at Reed College. Jobs dropped out of his formal studies but kept attending classes that interested him, including calligraphy. At the time, studying calligraphy had zero apparent connection to building a technology company. It made no strategic sense. It was, by any practical measure, reckless. But years later, the elegant typography and font design that became a hallmark of Apple's products flowed directly from those calligraphy lessons. The path was not visible from the beginning. It only made sense looking backward. The message is powerful. Meaningful paths often begin with actions that do not look strategic in the moment. You cannot always see where a step will lead. But you have to take it. To make this actionable, Jani introduces a framework he calls the crappy first step. For those who know their destination, pick a few proven, common strategies, plan hastily, and start executing immediately with the intention to adjust along the way. For those still searching, he offers two powerful sources of direction: obstacles and inclinations. Your obstacles are your current and past frustrations. Your inclinations are the subjects that make you curious without being forced to engage. Where these overlap, a calling often lives. Stop waiting for clarity before you act. Clarity is not the prerequisite for action. Action is the path to clarity. Mechanic 2, rewiring the psyche. Once you have started, you very quickly run into the second great barrier to achievement. And this one is invisible. You cannot see it, you cannot point to it on a spreadsheet, and yet it is almost certainly the single biggest reason talented people fail to reach their potential. It is the way your own mind works against you. Jani dedicates the second mechanic of achievement to what he calls rewiring the psyche, the deep, internal reprogramming required to align how you think with how you want to act. The central insight here is that most of us carry a set of mental programs that were installed early in our lives. These programs include beliefs about what we deserve, what we are capable of, what success feels like, and how much risk is acceptable. Many of these beliefs are not conscious. They operate below the surface, quietly shaping every decision, every reaction, and every moment of self-sabotage. Jani is particularly pointed about the concept of self-worth. The argument is not merely philosophical. The claim is that your external results are fundamentally capped by your internal sense of what you deserve. If you believe at some deep level that you are not truly worthy of success, your unconscious mind will find ways to ensure that you never quite reach it. You will sabotage relationships. You will self-destruct at moments of breakthrough. You will leave important things unfinished, always finding a reason why now is not quite the right time. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your beliefs. This is why Jani argues that the inner metrics of achievement, self-confidence, a strong self-image, a stable sense of self-worth, are more important leading indicators than external metrics like revenue, titles, or possessions. The external metrics are lagging indicators. They follow the internal ones, not the other way around. One of the most practical contributions in this section is Jani's emphasis on metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking. He describes this as possibly the single most important skill a person can develop. Not intelligence. Not discipline. Not networking. The ability to watch your own thoughts as they arise and recognize them as thoughts rather than facts. When you can observe the thought, "I am not good enough for this," as a mental event rather than a truth, you create space between the thought and the response. And in that space, you can choose differently. This is where mindfulness and meditation enter the framework, not as spiritual practices but as cognitive tools. The practical prescription in Mechanic 2 is to build systems of awareness and design your environment, inputs, and relationships so they reinforce the identity you are building. Mechanic 3. The engine of execution. Now we get to the mechanic that most productivity books try to cover and almost universally get wrong. Execution. Extraordinary people don't do extraordinary things. They just do the same simple things with extraordinary consistency. Mitesh Jani. This is a direct challenge to the way most people think about elite performance. We tend to imagine that high achievers succeed because of extraordinary talent, extraordinary effort, extraordinary willpower. And while those things matter, Jani argues that the real differentiator is something far more boring and far more accessible: the ability to generate consistent, sustained output over time, even when motivation is absent. This is the mechanic most people get backwards. They wait for motivation to show up before they begin working. They treat motivation as the fuel for the engine. But Jani argues that this model is inverted. Action is the fuel for motivation, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel inspired before you write. You write, and inspiration often follows. He introduces the concept of motivation on demand, building systems and rituals that reliably trigger action regardless of how you feel on any given day. Elite performers do not rely on emotional momentum. They have pre-committed to a routine, and they execute it not because they feel like it but because the system demands it. This section directly addresses procrastination with more precision than most books manage. Jani identifies several distinct varieties: the planning high, decision fatigue, perfectionism disguised as quality control, and the fear of beginning because beginning makes failure possible. Each of these requires a different response. The antidote to all of them shares a common foundation: implementation intentions, the specific, pre-decided commitments to when, where, and how you will act. Not, "I will work on my project this week," but "I will sit at my desk at 6:30 a.m. every morning before checking my phone and work for 90 minutes. The more specific the commitment, the less room there is for negotiation when resistance shows up. Jani also draws on stories from the worlds of business and sport. He examines Michael Phelps, whose training regimen was built around the complete elimination of days off. Phelps trained on Christmas. He trained when he was sick. He trained when he did not feel like it. The consistency of that commitment, compounded over years, created a gap between him and his competitors that mere talent could never have produced. Mediocre consistency, compounded over time, beats intense inconsistency every single time. Mechanic 4. The leap, when everything clicks. This is the mechanic that Mitesh Jani describes as his personal favorite, the one that took him years to research, observe, and articulate. And once you hear it, you will never look at a plateau the same way again. Most people assume that progress is linear. You put in work, you get results. More work, more results. The graph in their minds looks like a steady diagonal line climbing upward. And when reality does not match that expectation, when they work hard and see little visible progress, they conclude that they are doing something wrong. They change strategy. They lose confidence. They quit just before the breakthrough they were building toward. Jani introduces a different model, the exponential curve. Progress in any meaningful domain does not look like a straight diagonal line. It looks like a long, flat, almost invisible stretch of ground-level activity followed by a sudden, dramatic upward surge. The work that feels like it is producing nothing, the invisible phase, the plateau, is in fact the period of greatest internal development. The roots are growing underground, even when nothing is visible above the surface. He draws on concepts from complexity theory and what he describes as emergent phenomena, the way that certain kinds of transformation do not happen gradually but in sudden leaps. Think of water heating from 0 to 99 degrees Celsius. Nothing dramatic happens. It is just hot water. But at 100 degrees, the entire state of the substance changes. It becomes steam. It transforms. Skill development, perspective shifts, and business growth often follow the same pattern. Nothing visible happens for a long time, and then everything clicks. Jani references Jean-Michel Basquiat, who spent years producing work that the mainstream art world largely ignored before suddenly being recognized as a generational genius almost overnight. He references Harrison Ford, who worked as a carpenter into his 30s before landing the role of Han Solo. The work before the breakthrough is not wasted time. It is the compressed foundation upon which the leap is built. The long plateau is not evidence of failure. It is the precondition of the leap. Jani also examines the metaphysical dimension of the leap, the role of what he calls randomness that works out, the unexpected connections, coincidences, and opportunities that seem to materialize out of nowhere for people who have been consistently putting themselves and their work into the world. The more you show up, the more surface area you create for serendipitous moments to find you. Mechanic 5. Ditch the map, trust the compass. This is perhaps the most philosophically rich section of the entire book, and the one that Jani encoded visually in the design of the cover. The compass positioned at the bottom of the face-shaped gear arrangement is not decorative. It is a thesis. Jani draws a sharp and important distinction between a map and a compass. A map tells you exactly where to go. It is specific, rigid, and predetermined. Following a map feels safe because it eliminates uncertainty. But maps are static, they reflect the territory as it was when they were drawn, not as it is today. And they reflect someone else's understanding of the territory, not yours. A compass, by contrast, does not tell you the exact route. It tells you your direction. It is internal. It responds to your true north, your deepest values, your sense of meaning, your authentic self, rather than to external expectations or social scripts. The argument Jani makes here is subtle but important. Goal setting as typically practiced can become a form of self-imprisonment. When you fix a specific external outcome as your definition of success and then pursue it rigidly regardless of what you discover along the way, you risk arriving at the destination and finding it hollow. Or worse, you spend so much energy chasing a goal that no longer reflects who you have become that you miss entirely the path that would have brought genuine fulfillment. The most sustainable path to achievement is not the one someone else drew for you. It is the one you navigate with your own inner compass. Jani introduces the concept of periodic realignment, the deliberate practice of stepping back from day-to-day execution to ask whether the plan still reflects your compass. Are the things you are working towards still meaningful to you? Have your values evolved? Are you pursuing this goal because you genuinely want it, or because you told people you wanted it and now feel trapped by the commitment? He draws on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant and the idea of acting from internal conviction rather than external pressure, the distinction between doing the right thing because it aligns with who you are versus doing the right thing because you fear the consequence of not doing it. Long-term achievement requires the former. The latter exhausts people. The practical tools in this section include values clarification frameworks, regular strategic reviews, and future self-journaling. Mechanic 6. The architecture of sustained performance. The sixth and final mechanic is the one that separates people who have one great run from people who build careers and lives of lasting excellence. This is the mechanic of sustainability, the habits, systems, and mindsets that allow elite performers to maintain their edge not for a sprint, but over a lifetime. Jani opens this section with a deceptively simple observation: most performance advice is optimized for short-term output. It tells you how to get more done in a day, how to push harder through resistance, how to extract maximum productivity from every hour. And in the short term, this advice often works. But over time, it destroys people. The high performers who sustain their excellence over decades, the Murakamis, the Kobe Bryants, the Richard Bransons of the world, do not succeed because they push harder than everyone else every single day. They succeed because they have built systems of recovery, reflection, and renewal that allow them to show up at a high level consistently over years and decades. Recovery is not a luxury. It is a performance variable. This section draws heavily on the science of habit formation, the psychology of sustainable motivation, and the neuroscience of recovery. Jani argues that the physical state of the body is inseparable from the performance of the mind. Sleep, nutrition, physical movement, and mental downtime are not indulgences that high achievers avoid, they are the infrastructure that makes high achievement possible. He also addresses the psychological dimension of sustainability, specifically, the relationship between identity and behavior. The most durable habits are not the ones we force ourselves to perform, they are the ones we perform because they are expressions of who we believe we are. A person who identifies as a runner runs even when they do not feel like it because runners run. That is what they do. The behavior is not sustained by willpower, it is sustained by identity. Jani examines the habits of elite performers with a particular focus on what he calls deliberate renewal cycles, the structured rhythms of intense focus followed by intentional recovery that characterize the routines of high performers across fields. Athletes do it instinctively. The most effective executives, artists, and scientists do it too. The ones who learn to do it intentionally sustain their peak far longer than those who simply push until they break. Achievement is not a destination. It is a way of living. Fulfillment is not found at the end of the process. It is woven into it. Let's summarize it. Let us zoom out for a moment and look at the full picture. The process is built on one central, radical claim: achievement is an inside job. Everything we have covered, starting before you are ready, rewiring your beliefs, building execution systems, understanding the true arc of progress, aligning with your compass, sustaining your performance, all of it points toward the same truth. The outer results people desire are not primarily a function of strategy, talent, connections, or timing. They are a function of inner development. Mitesh Jani is a dentist who spent over a decade quietly accumulating insights while building businesses, hitting personal lows, and doing the unglamorous inner work of rebuilding. He is writing as someone who understands, from the inside, what it feels like to be stuck, and who found his way through by developing and applying these 6 mechanics. 2 of his original quotes from the book capture the philosophy beautifully. All greatness flows from a core that is illogical, impractical, irrational, and unrealistic. Extraordinary people don't do extraordinary things. They just do the same simple things with extraordinary consistency. Those 2 ideas sit in beautiful tension with each other. The dream has to be unreasonable. The execution has to be ordinary. That is the formula. What you should do with this. So here is where we land. You have just absorbed the core framework of the process, 6 Mechanics of Achievement by Mitesh Jani. 6 mechanics. 6 interlocking systems that, when understood and applied together, create the conditions for genuine, lasting achievement in any domain of life. Mechanic 1 told you, start now, start badly if necessary, and trust that clarity follows action. Mechanic 2 told you, before you can change what you do, you must change what you believe about yourself. Mechanic 3 told you, consistency beats intensity. Build systems, not moods. Mechanic 4 told you, the plateau is not failure. It is the invisible phase of the exponential curve. The leap is coming, if you stay consistent. Mechanic 5 told you, ditch the rigid map. Navigate with your inner compass. Course correct with courage. Mechanic 6 told you, sustainability is the ultimate competitive advantage. Build the architecture to last. You are not behind. You are not broken. You just needed the compass. Now you have it. Go build something worth building. If any part of what you heard today resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in the planning high, in the invisible plateau, in the drift away from your compass, this book is worth your time. And if this summary gave you value today, like this video, leave a comment telling us which mechanic hit you hardest, and subscribe, because we do this every week for those who are serious about their growth.